Hey everyone, really great to be here with you. My name is Sami. I'm ecosystem coordinator at BSC. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit today and share some information about our latest growth fund. Some of you might have seen the news about that. It's a $1 billion growth fund, and I'll share some more information about the coverage of the fund, what the funding is going to be used for. Um, so let me go ahead and share my screen, and I'll take you through a couple of slides that will provide a lot more information. Um, so this is the second fund that we've launched for BSC. The first one was a $100 million fund, which we launched uh, late 2020. It was a $100 million fund that was used primarily for investments and grants and supporting initiatives to help the developer ecosystem that was actively building on BSC. Uh, Last month, we launched the second fund, which is a $1 billion fund, which is split across four key areas. So the first one is an investment fund. So we're allocated $500 million towards investing and backing the best teams in crypto and Web3, building across a number of domain areas, which we'll talk a little bit more about shortly. We have allocation of $300 million earmarked for builder and incubation programs. I'll also share some more insights about what that's about as well. Um, we've got $100 million allocated towards liquidity incentive programs, primarily for DeFi, gaming, and professional traders, and another 100 million allocated for talent development initiatives. Um, so the talent development program, we have a number of ambitions here. So here, really, the primary objective is to bring more talent into the Web3 ecosystem. I think most builders and teams in crypto today would agree that there is not nearly enough developers in the ecosystem. And if you really look at the level of developer adoption, although we've been growing well, I think we're very far from where we really want to be. So we want to bring net new developers into crypto and start building out projects and supporting them on that journey. There's several ways that we're looking at achieving that. So we're collaborating a lot with academia, so universities, blockchain clubs, and we'll expand to other areas of education, including K-12 over time. At the moment, we're starting off collaborations with some of the leading universities across the world. We'll also support research and development and research initiatives inside those universities, and roll out over time a number of different types of education and training programs aimed at developers and also non-engineering audiences over time. The builder and incubation program is really aimed at providing various types of financial as well as non-financial support for developers and teams building out projects in crypto. So a good example of this is the most valuable builder program that was launched for the BSC ecosystem. We're currently in the third cohort of the most valuable builder program. And that program, it's open to any developers currently building a project on BSC infrastructure. They can register their smart contracts. The information for this registration process you can find in the link here, which is our blog, or just head over to our blog at binance.org. You'll find the link to our blog. You'll get all the details there that you need about the MVB program, the registration process, and everything else. But basically, the developers will register their smart contracts, and then we start tracking their progress of their projects, providing them with ecosystem support as well as access to a number of different community support channels. And then for projects that continue to achieve user traction and demonstrate product market fit, get additional benefits and additional support And several of the selected winners in the MVP program have also achieved listings on Binance.com, amongst other benefits. We also, as part of the Builder and Incubation program, have an initiative called the Biddle Reward Program. So this basically provides another revenue stream for project teams in which up to 30% of the transaction fees accumulated by their smart contract suites are paid back to the project teams. So just provides another kind of revenue source, and teams can decide to use that in different ways. Some of the teams pass those cost savings directly back to their users. And other creative ideas of how that kind of funding support is used. We're also running hackathons quite frequently. So we're running hackathons in almost all regions of the world, and we're looking to expand the frequency as well as coverage of our hackathon programs. And we've also been supporting the developer community with initiatives like our bug bounty matching program, which we've called Priority One, and we want to expand the scope there as well to continue to improve the security and developer culture and importance of security within the developer culture in the BSC ecosystem. Regarding our liquidity incentive program, so we've allocated $100 million here. So for the liquidity incentive program, the main objective here is to drive sustainable liquidity and user growth. So there's three initial focus areas. So DeFi protocols. So for sure, BSC has a well-established and growing DeFi ecosystem. We want to continue to support liquidity and user growth in a sustainable way for the DeFi ecosystem here. The other areas on gaming and NFT, there's a rapidly growing gaming ecosystem and NFT ecosystem on BSC. So the liquidity incentive program here is being used for in a number of different ways, including transaction fee subsidy and other kind of initiatives that can help to accelerate user growth for those projects. The other area that this liquidity incentive program is targeting is the professional market makers and liquidity providers, quantitative trading funds that are active in the BSC ecosystem or looking to become active in the BSC ecosystem. So here, besides actual funding support, we're also providing technology support for across these three categories. I think another important point to mention here is that we're really encouraging, especially the DeFi community and projects, to think of creative ways that the liquidity incentive funding can be used to grow their user bases, as well as TVL, community size, transaction volume growth. So I think like different criteria or different metrics that are important for different types of projects and even different types of DeFi protocols. Coming to the investment program, so there's $500 million allocated towards the investments. So we're looking to back the best teams in the space. We're looking at a number of sectors. So decentralized computing, for sure, gaming is going to be a very large focus area for us. Driven largely by the fact that we're already seeing very large user growth happening for a lot of the games in the BSC ecosystem. And I think here as well, we see a significant opportunity for driving more broadly crypto adoption. And a lot of good case studies here, for example, Axie Infinity and a number of others that have brought lots and lots of net new users to crypto. Which ultimately drives everything that we're doing and kind of focused on. So gaming for sure is going to be a big focus area. We'll also continue our focus on the DeFi space, looking at supporting the next, not only DeFi 2.0, but whatever comes afterwards. So the next set of composable money Legos, like fixed rate lending, interest rate swaps, and other emerging areas in the DeFi space. Another area of high interest for the and focus for the investment teams are social fi use cases and projects. Um, so to go into a little bit more details around the investment criteria, so we're looking at support. We're looking to talk to projects that are at all stages. Um, we're looking for developers with track record, of course, but even ones that are still at a kind of ideation stage and kind of forming teams around building out products around particular ideas and looking at tackling specific problem spaces, through to products that are already demonstrating significant growth and user traction. Um, in terms of how projects can apply for investment funding, and they can access the application form from this link. So we're looking to receive pitch decks, information around token economics, as well as product demos if the projects are currently at that stage. In terms of how we're prioritizing projects for investment evaluation and decisions, it's based on several criteria. So we're looking at innovation as one of the key aspects. So what exactly are those project teams looking at solving? Are there others doing that currently? Even if there are, how are these project teams looking at approaching that problem in a different or unique way? Is there a clear product roadmap? Is there a clear product strategy? Um, so these are kind of like really quick key questions that we're looking for the project teams to provide answers and information to. Another area is traction. So for sure, that's another very important evaluation criteria. What does the user base look like? What does the velocity of growth of the user base look like? What does the community size look like? And here we're really focused more on the underlying product than the token of a associated token for a project. So we really want to kind of look at the on-chain data of the smart contract suites to kind of get a accurate picture of what the user growth and usage of those products look for. So for sure, user traction is another important criteria that we're driving prioritization. Um, the other area that we also place high emphasis on in terms of prioritization is for the teams. So we are looking to back teams that have previous track record. I think that's one of the areas we are evaluating. And also relevant experience, even if the team doesn't necessarily have prior track record in crypto, but within the specific domain or problem space that they're looking at tackling. So also wanted to cover some insights on kind of perspectives that we've seen through our investment teams and activities. So we're also looking at identifying certain issues for ahead of time. So with any projects that we're evaluating, we're looking at kind of how effective has their planning been in terms of planning their runway and fundraising. Of course, fundraising is not like well suited for every project team. Some people can manage it really well or even thrive doing it. Some people don't really like doing it, and that's fine. But I think planning that runway and cash flow is also super important. So we're trying to evaluate that. Also trying to evaluate the project team's hypotheses around their product market fit and what they're trying to achieve is also quite important. And then we're also looking at their execution capabilities. I think the execution capabilities is one of the really important things. So we're looking for teams that are shipping and continuously shipping, that are keeping up to date with what's happening in their respective problem spaces, and especially like competition. We're also looking at the project team's understanding of their revenue and business models, as well as any regulatory and compliance risks and how they're planning and managing these areas. And then for sure, I think one of the key areas that we're placing a very high level of importance on is around security and secure development practices. How do teams view auditing, as well as the quality of technical development. Um, So also wanted to cover some more perspectives on the Binance chain and Binance Smart Chain perspective on the evolution of how we see DeFi growing and the intersection of centralized and decentralized finance. So the term CDeFi, I think, is kind of like many people would have heard of, but we really see CDeFi as bridging Web 2 and Web 3, and a key, and we see that we could play a really key role here, and we want to support the developer community that also identifies these types of opportunities. I also want to re-emphasize what I mentioned earlier about driving crypto adoption. So I think that's really at the center of everything that we're doing within the Binance chain team and more broadly for Binance as well. So driving crypto adoption is really a key objectives, and we're looking at supporting use cases and domains that accelerate that. I think gaming is a great one, but there's a number of others as well. I think any emerging market trends that we see a potential of driving increased crypto and accelerated crypto adoption are project teams and domains that we want to support. In terms of multi-chain, we've always believed that a multi-chain future will exist, and that's becoming increasingly a multi-chain reality today. And we see that there will be multiple base settlement layers, as opposed to just one global settlement layer. So we see that there is likely going to be multiple interoperable and composable base layers. Of course, we're still a little bit early in that, but that's increasing. There's increasing development driving towards that that vision. At the same time, having a balance of decentralization as a core Web3 philosophy, without necessarily impacting any of the points I mentioned previously. Just to recap here, so there's this is the link. You can find this on Binance.org, and to keep up to date with the latest announcements, the latest news about what's happening in the Binance Smart Chain ecosystem, highly recommend listeners to follow us on Twitter. So it's Twitter/Binance Chain. And then you'll find our blog and other relevant and useful information at Binance.org. So I'll just stop sharing here. I'll go to the comments and just answer a few questions, if that's okay. And feel free to share any questions you have in the comments. I'm just going to pick a few of them. There's a question from Tippy, who says, I have some 11-year-old students who are interested in Web3. What do you tell them and me as their teacher? It's a good question. So I think most people in crypto today never really had any kind of formal education or learning experiences. I think there are some really great ones. There's some good developer programs out there. But I think most people are currently in the space are really self-taught, and there's a lot of good information available today. So I think it's really about creating that intellectual curiosity in those students to understand what opportunities decentralized technologies and infrastructure can provide, what the opportunities of disintermediating and re-architecting some of the legacy systems, whether that's in finance or other domains, can provide, and start encouraging those students to start thinking differently about how um, uh, different businesses or industries are really constructed. There's another question from Mr. Phenom who's asking, could you discuss BSC versus AVAX versus Polygon? I think another interesting question. So there are differences. I think ultimately there's also a lot of similarities. So they're all EVM chains. They have slightly different architecture, slightly different um, trust assumptions, different properties. I think ultimately projects, especially in the DeFi space, will become increasingly multi-chain. So you'll have users that have uh, certain preferences that drive which infrastructures and chains they want to use. Could be for different reasons. So access points could be one of them. It could be based on where their assets are. There's, I think, a number of different reasons that will drive those decisions. But for DeFi protocols that want to be able to access their real total addressable market, will eventually have to be on many different chains. Um, and I think there's other differences as well, right? So for DeFi developers in the BSC ecosystem, get to test market demand for assets that aren't really found in other ecosystems, for different reasons. So I think there's with a number of these EVM chains, obviously there's a lot of similarities, and that also makes it quite easy for the developer community to be able to build on these different chains. But ultimately, I think it's not going to be a question of having to use one over the other, rather than being on multiple chains based on user preferences for which infrastructures and chains users prefer using. Um, I think there's no more questions here. So there's one more question that's just come from Mr. Phenom. How can I develop multi-chain dApp? Any resources? I think there's lots of good resources. So I think definitely head over to the Binance Smart Chain developer docs. You'll find it at docs.binance.org. And there's a number of resources there, including lists of developer tools and a number of other useful resources for the developer community to start getting involved and being able to start building on Binance Chain. I'm sure similarly there's good resource and documentation on the either the ecosystem foundation or developer documentation site for other chains as well. Cool. So I think that's the end of the question. So thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it. Thanks and goodbye.